Hey guys, so a lot of people have asked me over the years how I get my sound. I already did some videos talking about my guitar and my pedal board setup, but I also wanted to talk about how I record my guitar and how I mix it, which is probably what most of you are wondering. So this is that video. Before we get started, I just wanted to clear a few things up. This isn't like a general how to record acoustic guitar tutorial. This is just my way of doing it for the sound that I'm trying to get. It's really kind of this trial and error thing I've done over the years. And I'm still trying stuff out, still experimenting. But my goal is really to get a huge, larger than life sound. I'm not going for an authentic acoustic folk sound or something like that. I'm really trying to get the guitar to sound as big and aggressive as possible. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that none of the microphones or software that I'm going to show you in this video are essential for any of this. These are just the tools that I've gotten over the years, and it's what I'm used to, so that's what I use. It doesn't mean that you have to get these specific microphones or these specific plugins. These are just examples of what you can use. But the idea is to use the tools that you have or that you have access to and see what you can get using those. Okay, so first up, let's look at the microphones and how I have them set up. So the general idea here is to get as many microphones up as I can, record the pickups from the guitar as well, and combine them all when I mix. This gives me more options to add effects and play with the sound and the panning and everything. Right now I have 3 microphones set up here in front of the guitar. Lately I've been adding a 4th microphone over my shoulder. The idea there is to capture the sound that I'm hearing while I play. And that's worked pretty well, but I decided to keep it, well, not simple, but try not to overcomplicate things for this video. So going through the 3 microphones, this one right here is what I consider to be the main microphone. This is where most of the sound is going to come from. In this case, I'm using a large diaphragm condenser. This is a Groove Tubes GT55. As far as I know, they don't make them anymore, but it's a pretty good mic. It's kind of a mid-priced, normal condenser mic. So then I have this mic positioned. This is sort of the most common way that I've seen that people record acoustic guitars, or at least that you see on tutorials and stuff like that. Basically, the microphone is at around the 12th fret of the guitar, and it's aiming towards the sound hole, more or less here where the sound hole meets the fretboard. That mic position is really good at capturing the overall sound of the acoustic guitar, so it's a good place to start. Then right next to that microphone, I have a Rode NT3. Actually, both of these microphones are NT3s. I've had these microphones since I bought them back when I was in Berkeley, and I've had them for a really, really long time. I actually used them to record Wood, my first album. And originally I only used those 2 microphones. And then later on I added pickups and I added more microphones. So there you can get an idea of how my sound has progressed over the years. So this microphone is pretty much aiming at the same place as the first microphone. The idea is to get 2 different microphones capturing the same sound of the guitar, or the same part of the guitar. Really the main reason I do that is to avoid having too many phasing issues when I'm mixing. We'll get to that in the mixing stage. And then on the right side, I have the other Rode microphone. And the idea here is to just capture another area of the guitar. Right now I have it a little closer than usual, just so it can fit in the shot. But I usually move it back so it's aiming around this area behind the bridge. That gives me a nice overall sound of the guitar. It's worth mentioning that this microphone by itself, capturing this part of the guitar, doesn't really sound very good. It's very MIDI and humpy. But in combination with the other microphones, it works really well. It fills out certain frequencies that these microphones aren't really capturing. So that's why I do it. But I'm always trying new stuff out. I try different areas of the guitar, with this microphone especially. And then finally, I record the direct signal from both my pickups. I talked about this in my guitar video, but I have a DiMarzio Black Angel and a K&K Pure Mini. And I send both of those straight to the interface. Most of the times I only use the Black Angel, but it's still nice to have both pickups recorded just in case. It's actually ended up saving me a couple times. So yeah, again, I just try to record as much as possible, and then in the mixing stage is where the fun begins. So let's go on to that part. All right, so now we're here in my DAW. I'm using Reaper, and I have everything more or less set up. Here we have the 5 tracks, 3 microphones, and the 2 pickups. The GT, that's the groove tubes. That's what I would consider the main microphone. Then the 2 Rhodes. This one's the one that's right next to the groove tubes. And this one would be the one that's on the other side. And then we have the 2 pickups, the K&K Pure Mini and the Black Angel. Let me play each one separately so you can hear how they sound. So here we have the groove tubes. Okay, then we have the first Rode microphone. Again, this is the one right next to the groove tubes. You can hear they have a similar sound. Obviously, they're different microphones, so they're going to sound different, but they're aiming at the same area of the guitar, so they are picking up that same sound, just with a different frequency response. So then we have the other Rode, and like I mentioned, this one's by itself, it doesn't sound that great. It's picking up a lot of the resonance from the top of the guitar and not the actual strings, but it's nice to fill in the sound. Okay, and then we have the 2 pickups. This is the K&K Pure Mini. This is the one that's under the saddle of the guitar. Okay, of the 2 pickups, this is the one that sounds more natural. I mean, obviously it doesn't sound the same as a microphone, but it's closer than this other pickup. The Black Angel is a magnetic pickup, so it has more of an electric sound, like this. Yeah, so the cool thing about the magnetic pickup is that it's cool for playing around with effects and also for adding distortion and that type of thing. So we'll look at that later. Okay, so before we set the levels, I mentioned phase issues before. Since the microphones are at different distances from the source, the waveforms don't line up exactly. So that causes a lot of phase cancellations, like a lot of frequencies cancel each other out. And things happen like the low end will disappear, or you'll get this weird scooped sound, stuff like that. So what I used to do is I zoom into the waveforms like this and try to line all the tracks up manually. But now I use this plugin called M Auto Align by Melda Productions. What you do with this plugin is you put it in all the tracks that you want to fix any phase issues, and then you make sure they're all in the same group. In this case it says drum set, but that's just a name. And then you, while it's playing back, you press analyze. and it'll automatically align everything. I already did this before, that's why I didn't press it. But let me I'll bypass it and play it back, and then while it's going, I'll turn it on so you can hear the difference. So you can hear there's quite a big difference when everything's lined up correctly. Ideally, what you would want to do is avoid these issues while you're recording. So you line up the microphones, you make sure that they're all at the same distance or at a distance that works. But since I'm also using pickups, there's always going to be some phase issues because the pickups are right on the guitar. So that obviously the sound doesn't take that long to travel. Versus a microphone that's a foot or 2 feet away or more. So I always have to do some phase correcting when I'm mixing these. All right, so now that we have them aligned, let's set the levels. This is how I usually do it. I start with the groove tubes again. And then the 2 Rode microphones, I pan them hard left and hard right. And I put them both at the same level. And then I bring them up until they start adding some depth to the sound. I'll show you. So I keep them below the main microphone so they don't overpower it, but you can still hear them and they really add some width to the sound and it really blends nicely. So here's without them. And with them. Okay, then we have the 2 pickups. I'll just blend these in. I generally, if I use them, I don't always use them, depends on the song. Sometimes I just use the magnetic pickup for effects. Sometimes I blend the actual sound into the guitar. It really depends on what I'm going for, the type of song. But I'll blend them in this case just so you can hear how they affect the sound. Start with a K and K. Since the K&K has a more natural sound, it's easier to blend it in without it being very obvious, but enough that it adds to the sound without distracting from the natural sound of the acoustic guitar. So sometimes I use it that way. When I feel that it's needed, sometimes it really doesn't do anything. And now the Black Angel, you'll notice that it does change the sound a little more drastically if I bring it up too much. You know, there it stops sounding like a really natural acoustic guitar, but it can still work. Again, depends on the song, depends on what I'm going for. Sometimes I do want maybe a slightly electric sound for some reason. Also, it's a lot more obvious when I'm strumming. Sometimes when I'm playing maybe fingerstyle stuff, or if I'm tapping, then actually the magnetic pickup works really well. All right, so let's blend it in again. I'll put it right to the point where you just start to notice it, just to have it in the sound. There. Okay, so now we have the overall blend of the sound. And then what I do is that all these 5 tracks go to this guitar track. And then this is where I add some of I had some of the effects here. So let's go through those. This is the usual effects chain that I use. I'm always trying different plugins out, but they always have the same purpose and the same order. Okay, so I usually start with a compressor. In this case, I'm using Smart Comp by Sonable. This one's really cool because you can get quite a lot of compression and it's still very transparent, so it doesn't squash the sound too much. Let me show you here. In this case, I'm compressing quite a bit just with this one. Sometimes I'll use I'll start with one compressor that isn't so drastic, and then later in the chain I'll add another one that maybe has a different function. Again, it depends on the track. For those of you who don't know what the compressor does, is that it brings up the quieter parts and brings down the louder parts. So if you have a song that's really dynamic, like in my case where I might do some fingerstyle for a bit and then I go into really hard strumming, that helps balance those things out so that the volume difference isn't so huge. And in those cases where it's really extreme, then I might use more than one compressor so that one compressor isn't doing like all the work. All right, so then after the compressor, I always go to an EQ. This first EQ is more for correcting any problems with the sound. This might be, I don't know, maybe the guitar sounds too boomy, there's too much low end, or there's some really harsh high frequencies, stuff like that. It's mostly cutting frequencies and getting rid of any nasty stuff that might be there. In this case, it's already sounding pretty good, so I don't feel like I have to do that much stuff. But one of the things I almost always do, at least with my guitar, because I feel it sometimes has a little bit too much mid-range in this frequency area. So I almost always cut around 1K. Let me show you how that sounds. I'll boost it first so you can hear that frequency and then how it sounds when I lower it. And then sometimes I also cut around here, like 400, if it sounds too boxy. In this case, I don't think it's really that necessary. And you really have to be careful with this one because it might thin out the sound a little too much. But let me experiment with it and see. Just cut a little bit there. I think it sounds a little cleaner like that. And then, for example, if this had like really harsh frequencies that were bothering me, I would wait, not that one. I would use like a really precise band and then just kind of search for those really ugly frequencies and then just cut them out. The thing you have to be careful there is that if you boost any frequency, especially in this range, high enough, it'll sound annoying. So first be sure that you're actually hearing some frequencies that are bothering you, and then try to look for them that way. Part of the reason that I'm not going to do that in this case is that now I have this cool plugin called Soothe, which it automatically kind of cuts any frequencies that are kind of sticking out. I don't know if that's the best explanation, but it's really cool for fixing that type of stuff. And whenever I don't have like anything really obvious, I like to put it, I mean, very gently. I don't exaggerate it too much, but just to clean up the high end a little bit. Because I always feel like my guitar, especially with the microphones I use, has a little too much harsh high end up there in like 4K, 6K. So I always try to clean that up. So this does it. This handles a lot of it for me. And then if I still feel like I need to cut something, then I'll go with the EQ. All right, so let's put this on. All right, and then now that, let's say we've corrected any problems with the sound, now I'd like to go to another EQ. In this case, I usually use some sort of analog style EQ. In this case, Puig Tech by Waves. And this one is more for sweetening, you know, for adding a little extra to the sound, like a little extra high end, add a little bit to the low end. In this case, I'm adding some highs on 10K. It's easy to get a little carried away with these, so I always try to have some reference tracks so I can compare and make sure I'm not going overboard or that I'm not boosting enough. But the idea is just to add a little bit to the sound and not go too crazy. And then finally, I always add some sort of modulation, like phaser or a chorus or something like that. In this case, I'm using the Meta Flanger by Waves. And if you notice here in the mix, I have it pretty low, so it's only adding a little bit to the sound. The idea is just to add some movement and a little more stereo width to it. But the idea is not to make it too obvious, you know. So let me turn it on. Okay, so now I'm gonna turn all those effects off and turn them on while it's playing so you can hear how much of a difference all of those make. Okay, so then the next step is to add some reverb, which is probably the most important thing, or one of the most important things in this case, because when you record a guitar especially in a small room, you're getting a really dry sound. It's not the natural sound of, you know, sitting in front of somebody playing an acoustic guitar. You're not really hearing the room, unless, you know, you're recording a really nice room and you have some room mics and all that stuff. But chances are that's not what you're working with, just like me. So it's really important to find the right reverb, and that changes from song to song, you know, and obviously what you're looking for. So I'm always trying different reverbs. In every song, I always try a couple and try different sounds just to see which one works best. In this case, I'm using the Abbey Road plates. I've been using this one a lot lately. I really like it for the acoustic guitar. And I usually just, it has these acoustic guitar presets. I usually try these, and the one I like the most, I set it and then I tweak it to how I want it. In this case, I have acoustic guitar 2. Let me show you, let me turn it off so you can hear without, and then I'll turn it on. Then I always add a little bit of delay. It's usually very much in the background. It's almost like basically adding to the reverb, not so much like a separate effect. In this case, I'm using Valhalla delay. Let me put it by itself so you can hear what it's doing. Whoops. By the way, I usually use a stereo delay so that it also adds a little bit of stereo width. And I like to put a filter on it so it kind of blends into the background more. So I really like sort of a lo-fi type of delay. Let me put it with the reverb so you can hear how they sound together. And now with the guitar. Okay, let me play it again. I'll start with all the effects turned off, and then I'll turn them on so you can hear where we started and what we finished with. All right, the last thing I wanted to show you is how I use distortion. Most of the time, if I have distortion in a track, it's very subtle. I'll just use like a little bit to add some grit. Maybe if it's more of an aggressive song or something like that. In other cases, obviously, I'll just use full-on distortion if I want that. In this case, let's see, let me show you what I'm doing. I have the Black Angel, the magnetic pickup. I'm sending that signal also to this track over here that I called amp. And I have here an amp sim, the Fortin Nameless by Neural DSP. And let me show you how that sounds by itself. In this case, I'm not really pushing it that hard. Like I could go full on metal with it, you know. But in this case, it's, I don't know, it's not really asking for that. So I'll just use it to add some overdrive. And then I can blend it with the sound. There's a certain sweet spot where it becomes part of the sound, and then if you bring it up too much, then it just kind of sounds like an electric guitar playing over it. Let me show you. Yeah, so that's another way to add a different color. I don't know if it's really necessary for this example, but I mean, just so you can hear what can be done. Okay, so that's how I mix my guitar. Hope you found that useful. This is just the way I do it. It's the method I've developed over the years from trial and error and having to record in bedrooms and crappy sounding rooms. Now, thankfully, I have access to the studio, so I have a better room to record in. But it's what's worked for me, and I'm always looking for ways to improve and trying stuff out. So I encourage you to do the same. Take this as just kind of some tips to get started and try it out, experiment, see what works for you, and hopefully you get some good results out of that. All right, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. And remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and see you next time.